I'm not always a huge fan of homages, but I think there are some cases where they can be really cool. For instance, if there's a historic watch that is no longer available, making an homage of that watch to kind of bring it back to life, I think is kind of a cool idea. And that's exactly what this watch we're going to look at today is. So before I jump into exactly what it is, let me show you guys this watch and see how many of you can guess what this watch is an homage of, because it kind of took me by surprise. I didn't instantly recognize it, but let's check it out. Hey everyone, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch. And if your guess after seeing that watch was that this was an homage of the original Seiko Alpinist, you got it exactly right. When I saw this watch the first time, I didn't pick up on it. I wasn't familiar with the history of the Alpinist going that far back. And if you don't know what the Seiko Alpinist is, it's one of Seiko's most popular watches. It's been around for a long time, has a pretty long history. And it is kind of a sort of field watch. But it comes from a different kind of tradition of field watches. You know, a lot of field watches have a military tradition. This one is definitely more of a hiking tradition. The idea behind it was, you know, it was built for the Japanese sort of mountain man, the guys who go around and hike up mountains, which is actually a really big thing here. I live in Japan. I live in rural Japan. There's a lot of mountains around. One of the closest ones to me is Mount Iwate, which I've been up a few times. And it is a really fun pastime that a lot of Japanese men and women really enjoy. And so the Seiko Alpinist, it is a watch that is, you know, built for hiking and for climbing, for being out in the field, but rather than having kind of a militaristic, you know, functional feel to it, it has a much more elegant look to it. It's a watch that is tough and well built to be able to handle a lot of the elements, while at the same time having characteristics that really remind you of, you know, a peaceful forest or, you know, a tranquil mountain that you're climbing up. And this watch, though it's an homage, really carries over a lot of those characteristics into this package. It has this cool blend of really functional specifications like 150 meters of water resistance, a sapphire crystal, and really fantastic lume, combined with an elegant 38mm case size and really beautifully done indices and hands. So simply as a watch, I think this is a really fantastic package. The 38mm case size is something you don't see often enough and is really desirable, particularly with people with smaller wrists, but even for people with larger wrists that want that smaller case size, this is great for that. It's got a really high domed sapphire crystal, which again is an unusual feature that you don't see in a lot of watches these days, and a somewhat elegant look to it. And then for those of you who are fans of Seiko and fans of the Alpinist, this obviously has a lot more interest in it being an homage of the original Seiko Laurel Alpinist. Now I do want to make sure that I mention that this watch was given to me by Merkur for review. They contacted me and asked me if I wanted to take a look at their catalog and see if there were any watches I was interested in featuring on their channel, and this is the one that really jumped out to me the most. It comes in at $229 from their site where you can pick it up. There's a link down below to check it out, but keep that in mind as we go through the review. And with all that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the watch. All right, here's a little bit closer look at the Merkur Conquest. You got 38mm across, 46mm lug to lug, and then 20mm lug width. The watch is also 12mm tall, but a good 2 or 3mm of that is this really high domed sapphire crystal. So the case and movement itself is actually really thin. Now the movement inside was a little bit of a mystery to me. It does have hand winding. It also has hacking. And they stated that this is an NH35 movement, but when I was playing around with that, I immediately noticed that that couldn't be the case because NH35 movement does have a date in the movement, but this does not have a ghost date position. The first position is the setting the time. So I was curious. I wasn't sure if it was just a misstatement on the website or what was going on. So I actually opened up the case back, and to my surprise, I found that this is actually an NH38 movement, which is Seiko's movement that they usually use for open heart watches, that does not have a date position. So that was really impressive to me. This is a no-date watch, and they managed to match it with a great Seiko workhorse movement that did not have a date, so you avoided that ghost date position. And that's a level of attention to detail that I don't see on a lot of major brand watches, much less coming from a Chinese micro brand like Merkur. And that level of attention to detail is something that I really noticed in almost every aspect of the watch. You're also getting these drilled lugs. You have this really nice kind of chamfered edge on the lugs, and the case design is actually somewhat interesting. It's not just a standard one. There's lots of different kind of steps and angles to it. And those applied indexes are just really cool. Especially I like how you get that really interesting marker at 12 o'clock where it's a triangle divided into 3 smaller triangles, whereas the markers at 3, 6, and 9 are divided in half to make it into 2 smaller triangles, giving you a little bit of indication of where the 12 o'clock marker is, which is historically accurate to the original sort of Laurel Seiko Alpinist. And that level of attention to detail kind of brings a little bit more mystique to this watch, because when I posted some photos of this on Instagram, I got some comments from some guys that are part of the Gruppo Seiko group in Italy, which I think is one of the largest Seiko forums in Italy. And when I got to chatting with one of the guys on there, and he mentioned that they had actually done the original design work for this watch. They wanted to create a Seiko Alpinist homage, and they had a very limited number of them produced and sold to members of the forum. And after that, Merkur kind of picked it up and did a larger run and made it more widely available. And he was saying that really the only difference between the Merkur version and theirs is the marking. So Merkur, they put their own name on it. They renamed it to the Conqueror, and different case back. They renamed it. But as far as the specs and the actual watch itself, it's fairly comparable, if not identical, to what Gruppo put out. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And I think this is kind of a special watch. And so, to me, that's kind of cool that this is kind of being made more widely available and that you do have that option to pick this up. I want to take a little bit closer look at the dial and talk a bit about that, because I think that is one of the more interesting features of this watch. To me, it really has this kind of maybe Art Deco sort of feel to it. The markers are definitely very interesting with the batons for most of them, but again, getting those large triangles for the 12, 3, 6, and 9. And then I thought it was really interesting how they moved the second track, or the minute track. Instead of going around the outer edge of the watch, it goes around this inner dial, which makes it just as easy to read and is really useful in picking out the individual minute or second, but it just moves it to a different place and gives the watch kind of a different look and feel. The hands also are all made out of very elongated triangles, kind of again playing into that sort of triangular theme throughout the watch. So there's a lot of cohesiveness to the design. I really like the kind of long, slender, elegant lugs that come out of this as well. And again, as I noted before, that sort of chamfered edge along the lugs is also really cool. Another huge bonus that they included drilled lugs on this, making strap changes a lot easier. But you wouldn't necessarily need to do a strap change because the included suede strap is actually really high quality. It's very comfortable and supple, it breaks in really quickly, and it does match the watch and look great. Now, a watch that has this simple of a design, I think, is one that you can match a lot of straps to it, so I'll show you a couple of other options in a minute here. On the wrist, the watch is extremely comfortable. That 38mm size and that low profile make it very easy to wear. It's the kind of thing that you're not really going to notice, so if you did use it as a field watch, it's a great size for that. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and to me, it looks a little bit on the small side visually. It's a little bit smaller than I'm used to. But again, I'm kind of getting used to these smaller sizes and beginning to appreciate them more. And that does really, again, play into the vintage nature of this watch. But if you have smaller wrists, and this is something that's definitely going to wear really well for you, and if you have larger wrists and prefer a smaller watch size, this is going to be a huge positive for you. Okay, now I've mentioned that the lume is really good on this watch a few times, but let's go ahead and take a closer look and see how it stacks up to some of the other watches in my collection. The lume on this watch really surprised me. Most of the Chinese watches that I've checked out before all had really poor lume, and that was primarily from the sub $100 category. And so I always kind of viewed this as a weakness of those sort of Chinese homages that were out there, is they didn't have that strong of lume. But this one is definitely a much more premium watch than a lot of the, like Cadison or Guanqin, the lower price ones. And thankfully the lume really reflects that as well. I included this one in a head-to-head competition with some of the watches that have the best lume in my collection, including a couple of divers, and actually did a full 3-hour time lapse on this one. Surprisingly, the Merkur at the end of the 3 hours, the hand brightness on it managed to outlast the Seiko Samurai. And the marker brightness beat out my Laco Casablanca, my Orient Star, and my Nighthawk. So really impressive amounts of lume coming out of this. Another thing that I really like about this watch is how great it plays with other straps. So let's go ahead and take a look at some different strap options. Okay, so first off, naturally, this being a field watch, we want to take a look at it on a NATO strap. I have it here paired up with a sort of gray or silver colored premium NATO strap from Mora, and I think it looks really great with this style on the wrist. Another cool option, I think, is to pair this up with a Perlon, which I think goes really well with this watch. I have this on a beige one here. I kind of wish I had a green one. I think a green Perlon would look really good with that white dial and kind of, yeah, match with the sort of field aesthetic of the watch. And speaking of green, I did pair it up with a green Italian leather strap from Vario, and I think it looks great on that strap as well. Just really classy, colorful look for this. Finally, just going with a nice, simple chocolate brown really matches the colors of this watch, and this one from Ritche is just a really good match for it as well. Links to all of these straps can be found in the description down below. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up and talk about what the main kind of pros and cons of this watch is. On the pro side, you have a really appealing design, a watch that has 150 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, fantastic lume, and all of that packed into a 38mm case size makes it for a package that you don't see quite often enough these days. So for guys looking for a watch with a slightly smaller case size, I think this is a really intriguing option. Now, if in addition to that you are also a fan of Seiko and the Alpinist in particular, I think this one is going to shoot up much higher on your list of watches to check out, because that inspiration from Seiko's history and catalog is there on display, and it's a really faithful adaptation of the original Seiko Alpinist. A lot of attention to detail, and just a really unique piece because of that. But as is always the case, this is definitely not a perfect watch, and there are a few negatives. And the biggest one, I think, is that lack of screw-down crown. That really kind of gives me some hesitation about that 150-meter water resistance claim. Now, you can get a watch with 150 meters of water resistance without a screw-down crown. It is possible, but I haven't actually seen that before. This is the first watch I've seen where they've stated 150 meters of water resistance and not also paired that up with a screw-down crown. So while I have no hard reason to doubt that, I just, there's a little bit less confidence in that because of the lack of screw-down crown. Alongside that, if you go to Merkur's website, the specifications that they list on the site aren't exactly accurate. I noted the movement mismatch before, where they noted there was a Seiko NH35 movement, where it's actually a Seiko NH38 movement. And things like that are fairly common in a lot of these Chinese brands. Sometimes there's some translation errors when they're going from Chinese to English, and oftentimes that can result in maybe a little bit less confidence in knowing exactly the specifications that you're getting. So I would have liked to have seen, maybe a little bit more confidence all around in the specifications of the watch. But that said, I've had the watch for about a month and have put it through some pretty good tests and wear, and it seems to be holding up really well. Overall, it appears to be a very well-built watch. Again, really high attention to detail, no quality control issues that I've noticed myself. So I don't have any hard reason to doubt their claims on the site or on the watch itself. Again, there's just some minor issues like that might cause a little drop in confidence. But if you're willing to overlook those two negatives, I think overall this is a fantastic watch. And at that $229 price point, it's a really interesting option and a really well-built watch. I think it is definitely, easily worth that asking cost that they're asking for. But all that out of the way, let me know what you guys think. Always love to hear your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.